Welcome back to Learn to Design on a Mobile Device with Onshape. My name is Christian Stark, and in this section we are introducing sketching basics. We will cover how to set the default model units. We will introduce the sketch user interface and available tools. We briefly talk about how to create geometry and how to dimension such geometry. But let's get started. The very first step you do in any of your models is you have to set the default length unit. So you go to the little icon displayed here next to the Onshape logo, you click units, and then you basically set your default length unit. I will, in all of this course, will use millimeter as my default length unit. You can also set the default math unit, you know, how heavy something is in either pounds or kilograms, but we can ignore that for now since we're not really doing anything with that particular thing. So after you've set the units, it's time to pick a plane in your model space and start your sketch. Once you've picked a plane and you selected the sketch tool, you will get the sketch user interface, which is a set of tools you see on the top of the screen. These tools are grouped in where on the far left you find very common use tools like undo and redo. It will also show you how to the extrude and revolve 3D modeling commands. They are very commonly used after you're done with your sketch. The next set of buttons basically allow you to create sketch geometry like rectangles, circles, splines, polygons, point, or even text. Followed by that is a set of helper functions. So you can insert a construction line. You can use a curve from another object and project it onto the plane, onto your sketch. You can round corners with the fillet command, or you can start trimming geometry. You can also use an offset to put an offset from one line to the next. You can mirror geometry or create patterns. And lastly, you can actually insert drawings from other formats and even images. Now on the far right side, there's a whole set of tools to define constraints onto your geometry. We will not cover this right now. We'll get back to this later in this module. But I just wanted to mention it here so that you know what this is for. Now when you start creating geometry, here's a few examples. You have blue lines, you have dots which mark corners, and you have what's called a region when your lines of geometry are enclosed or a profile. Sometimes it happens that the lines and dots are very, very, very close but really don't touch each other, and then you might think there's an arrow. It's almost always the case that the lines and points don't touch 100% when you don't see a gray region. Now you can create circles and ellipses, and you can create arcs and splines. Now there's a special type of line, which is a construction line, which will help you create geometry. These lines are all dashed, and they do not do anything when you create actually the part. So they are not picked up by the 3D modeling functions to create your 3D part. They are purely there for construction and help purposes. Now let's briefly talk about open and closed profiles. It's very important. If you want to create a three-dimensional part, you can only do this with a closed profile. Now you can create a surface with an open profile, like this half arc here. You'll see this later as we're actually applying these operations. Now, part of this are also what are called geometry manipulators. They're kind of helper points. You can now pick and select, and once you start dragging and moving them, you can actually change the size and shape of your geometry. And last, there are what's called automatic reference lines. And these reference lines, they only pop up randomly sometimes. They pop up, not randomly, but they pop up on as you're moving over the screen to line up your points and lines with other elements on the screen. In fact, once you use these reference lines, Onshape will automatically insert constraints. But again, we'll talk about this in a lot more detail in a later section.